I never imagined my life would turn into a story worth telling. For most of my 32 years, everything about me was quiet. My apartment, my routines, even the little office where I spent my days typing reports and answering phones. I used to think that quiet meant safe, and maybe in some ways it did, but it also meant that nothing ever stirred my heart, at least not until the day Daniel walked into our office and changed the air around me. He arrived on a Monday morning, the kind where the sun feels lazy and the coffee tastes a little bitter. I remember hearing footsteps behind me as I sorted through papers. When I turned around, he was standing there, introducing himself to the team. Daniel, 40 years old, new manager, married. All of that I would learn later, piece by piece. But in that first moment, all I noticed was the softness in his voice and the warmth in his smile, the kind that made you feel seen, even when you were trying to disappear into your work. He shook my hand and said, "You must be Emma." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Well," he said, "I'm looking forward to working with you." People say the heart gives little warnings before it falls. But mine didn't whisper anything. It simply opened quietly, secretly, as though it had been waiting for someone to speak to it in the gentle way he did. Days passed, and the smallest things began to matter. The way he asked if I'd eaten lunch, the way he remembered that chamomile tea helped with my headaches, the way he leaned closer when we reviewed documents, his presence warm enough to make my pulse skip. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just admiration, nothing more. But at night, when my apartment settled into its usual stillness, I found myself replaying his laugh, his voice, the way he said my name like he'd been saying it all his life. Then one afternoon, I saw it. A wedding ring. It felt like someone had taken all the air out of my lungs. Daniel wasn't just kind. He wasn't just warm. He was someone's husband, someone else's forever. I stared at my computer screen for the rest of the day, pretending to work, pretending not to feel the sting of something I couldn't even name yet. But love, real, foolish, unstoppable love, doesn't listen to reason. It grows in the spaces you don't guard well enough. I found myself caring more each day. His smile could undo the hardest mornings. His presence could steady me or shatter me depending on how near he stood. One evening, he leaned over my desk to help fix a small computer issue. His hand brushed mine, light, accidental, innocent. But my heart reacted like it had been struck by lightning. Heat rushed through me. My breath tangled in my throat. He looked at me, his brows softening. "Emma," he said, "are you okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't okay at all. My heart was betraying me, pushing me toward a man who couldn't be mine, a man whose life was tied to another woman, another family, another world that I had no right to step into. I tried avoiding him. I tried leaving the office quickly, keeping conversations short, anything to keep my heart from falling further. But he always noticed. Always. One morning, as I quietly gathered some files, he stepped close enough for me to feel the warmth of him. "You're seeming distant lately," he said softly. "I'm just tired," I whispered. He studied my face for a moment. Then he said the one word that would haunt me for weeks. "You're special, Emma." Special. I'd spent my whole life blending into the background. No one ever used that word for me. No one ever looked at me the way he did in that moment. That night, I cried in front of my bathroom mirror. Tears of confusion, longing, guilt, and something dangerously close to hope. But life has a way of reminding you what's real. A week later, I went to the park to clear my head. The air smelled like cut grass and warm sunlight. Children were running, laughing. I sat alone on a bench, breathing slowly, trying to empty my heart of him. And then I heard a familiar voice. Daniel. I turned my head just enough to see him and the woman beside him, his wife. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back, her smile easy and full. A little boy ran toward Daniel, laughing as he scooped him up. Moments later, a little girl tugged on his sleeve, and he kissed the top of her head. They were beautiful, a whole family wrapped in sunlight. I felt something inside me collapse. I looked away, pressing my nails into my palms to keep from crying. That was his real world, the one he belonged in, the one he cherished. I had no place in it. When they finally walked away, hand in hand, laughter trailing behind them, I sat frozen on that bench for a long time, and for the first time, I understood something painful and honest. He was never mine, not even in my dreams. That night, I whispered to myself, "Forget him, Emma. Please forget him." But the heart does not loosen its grip on command. The next morning at the office, I tried to bury everything under polite smiles and quiet work. But Daniel noticed the dullness in my eyes, the stillness in my voice. "Emma," he said, sitting beside me, "you seem sad." "I'm just tired," I said again. He sighed softly. "You're strong. You're kind. You matter more than you know." My heart twisted painfully at his words. If only he knew. If only I could tell him. If only things were different. But fate, God, life, whatever guides us, had other plans. And mine were just beginning to unfold. I wish I could say things got easier after that day in the park. But the truth is, something inside me changed forever. I walked into the office the next morning with a smile painted on my face, but it wasn't real. It felt like I was wearing someone else's skin, someone braver, someone who didn't fall in love with a man whose hand belonged to another woman. But Daniel, he had a way of undoing every wall I tried to build, even when he didn't mean to. That week, we stayed late at the office to finish a project. Everyone else had already left, their footsteps fading down the hallway until the whole place felt hollow. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence between us. Daniel was standing near the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. I sat at my desk, pretending to check emails, but I was really just trying to steady my heartbeat. He turned around and walked toward me. Slowly, purposefully, like he had decided something. "Emma," he said softly, his voice low enough to make the room feel smaller. "Can I tell you something?" My hands tightened around the edges of my laptop. "Yes." He hesitated. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, and I had no idea what he might say. Then finally he spoke. "You're important to me." Those words hit me harder than anything he'd ever said before. They were gentle, but they carried weight, dangerous weight. I swallowed hard, trying to breathe. He took a step closer. "I know this isn't simple. I know I'm not free, but when I'm around you, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time." I closed my eyes. I shouldn't have let those words touch me, but they did. They settled deep inside me, warm and painful at the same time. "Daniel," I whispered, "you have a family." He nodded. but there was sorrow in his eyes. I know, I love them, but that doesn't stop what I feel. And I wish it did. I really do. My heart jumped and ached at once. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. I wanted him to stop. I wanted him to finish. I was torn in ways I'd never been before. Then, without warning, tears began sliding down my face. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, trembling tears of a woman whose heart had no idea where it belonged. Daniel reached out, as if to wipe one away, but he stopped himself. His hand lingered in the air for a second before he pulled it back. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he whispered. "Especially you." I shook my head, wiping my cheeks quickly. "You're not hurting me. I did this to myself." "Emma." "No," I said gently. "Don't say anything more, please." We both stood there, breathing through a moment neither of us knew how to control. The world outside kept moving. Cars, people, laughter, life. But inside that office, everything felt suspended. I finally gathered my bag and walked toward the door. Before stepping out, I turned back, just once. "Take care of your heart, Daniel. It belongs to people who need you." He didn't answer. He just nodded, his expression torn, carved by something heavy. That night, I cried myself to sleep. I didn't cry because he didn't love me, because maybe in some complicated way he did. I cried because love doesn't always arrive in the right shape, the right time, or the right life. Sometimes it walks in wearing a wedding ring, and sometimes it destroys you, slowly. The days that followed felt strange. Daniel and I worked together like always, but something hung in the air between us, a tension soft as a whisper, but sharp enough to cut. He kept his distance and I kept mine, but every time our eyes met across the room, a silent truth passed between us. One afternoon, I stepped into the break room and found him standing there, staring at a cup of coffee like it held answers. "Hey," I said softly. He looked up, startled. "Emma." "Hi." We stood there for a moment, unsure of how to exist around each other anymore. Then he sighed. "I miss talking to you." My heart trembled. "We're still talking, not like before." He was right. There was a space now, an invisible line we were both afraid to cross. "I'm trying to do the right thing," I whispered. "I know. I am too." He offered me a sad, tired smile, the kind that makes a person look older, worn by choices and regrets. And in that moment, I realized something painful. I wasn't the only one hurting. That evening, after I got home from work, I sat on the floor of my bedroom, hugging my knees to my chest. The world outside my window glowed with streetlights and noises of life, but inside me, everything felt quiet, hollow. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. I wanted to forget him, but I couldn't. I wanted to believe that love always followed rules, but it didn't. Slowly, over the next few weeks, I began trying to reclaim pieces of myself. I read more. I took long walks. I met with old friends I had neglected. I told myself I needed distance, even though my heart still tugged toward him like a child reaching for its mother. But life always has its turning points. One Friday evening, just as I was packing my bag to leave, Daniel called my name. Emma, can we talk? I froze. Something in his tone sounded different, serious, heavy, like he was carrying news he didn't know how to deliver. I turned slowly. Sure. He walked towards me with careful steps, his eyes clouded. Emma, something happened. My heartbeat kicked up, sharp and fast. What do you mean? He glanced around as if making sure we were alone. My wife said, he said quietly, He paused, swallowing hard. What about her? He looked me straight in the eye, and what I saw there made my stomach twist. I think she knows, he said. A cold shiver crept down my spine. Knows what? Knows about me? Knows about him? About the feelings neither of us ever meant to have? He took a shaky breath. I didn't tell her anything, he said quickly. Nothing happened between us, but she sees something in me, something I didn't mean to show. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm, too dangerous. I'm so sorry, I whispered. It's not your fault, he said. It's mine, all of it. For the first time, he looked truly afraid. And deep inside me, a storm began to brewing. One that would soon change everything. When Daniel told me his wife suspected something, despite there being nothing physical between us, something inside me broke a little. It felt as if an invisible line had been crossed, not through actions, but through consequences. His world, the one I had only ever observed from afar, had begun to crack because of something as quiet and fragile as emotion. For a moment, we simply stood there, two people, caught between what we felt and what life expected of us. What are you going to do? I whispered. He let out a shaky breath. I don't know. I keep telling myself it's just stress, that things will settle. But she knows me too well. She can feel when my heart is somewhere else. Those words hit me hard. Daniel, I murmured, my voice unsteady, your heart belongs at home. He closed his eyes. I know that, but knowing doesn't make it real. Silence settled around us, thick and suffocating. I felt the weight of everything pressing against my chest. Guilt, longing, fear, truth. I wanted to say more, but I didn't trust myself to speak without falling apart. Before either of us could continue, a coworker walked into the office. We stepped apart quickly, pretending we'd been discussing spreadsheets and deadlines. Still, I felt the tension burning under my skin. That night, I stood under the shower long after the water went cold, asking myself why I allowed my heart to wander into something I always knew would hurt. I knew better. I had always known better. But love doesn't care how careful you try to be. It slips in quietly, like mist under a door, filling the room before you realize you're no longer breathing clean air. The next few days were difficult. Daniel kept his distance, not out of anger, but fear. He moved through the office like a man trying to hide a bruise no one else could see. He spoke less, smiled less, and every time our eyes met, something inside me tightened. I wanted to tell him it would all be okay, but I wasn't sure it would. One afternoon, I overheard two coworkers whispering near the copier. Daniel looks stressed, one said. Maybe something's happening at home, the other replied. Their words cut deeply. I wasn't part of his home, yet somehow I had become part of the problem. That was when I knew something needed to change. So that evening, when the office emptied and the lights dimmed, I walked to his office and knocked gently. Come in, he said. He was sitting with his head in his hands. When he looked up and saw me, relief and sadness flickered in his eyes. Emma, he breathed. I stepped inside and closed the door. We can't keep doing this, I said, my voice trembling but steady enough to speak the truth we'd both been avoiding. He leaned back, Exhaustion etched across his face. I know. We're hurting ourselves, I said softly, and we're hurting people who never chose to be part of this. He shook his head. I never wanted any of this to happen. I know, I whispered. Neither did I. He stood and walked around the desk, stopping just close enough for me to feel the warmth of him, the sadness, the longing. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. My throat tightened. His voice was soft, cracked, almost pleading. If he had reached for my hand, I think my heart would have shattered. You're not losing me, I said. But things have to change. We can't keep living in this halfway place. He nodded, though the words clearly hurt. They'll think I'm cold, distant. Maybe for a while, I said gently, but this is the right thing. Sometimes loving someone means stepping back so they can breathe. His eyes softened, filled with painful understanding. You deserve happiness, Emma. More than this. More than me. I swallowed hard. And you deserve peace. He took a deep breath, and for a second I thought he might break, but he didn't. He straightened, as if trying to repair the cracks in his life, even if it meant walking away from something that made him feel alive. Thank you, he murmured. For what? For caring enough to stop. Tears threatened, but I blinked them away. I couldn't fall apart now, not when we were finally choosing the painful, necessary truth. For a moment, we stood there, two hearts beating in the same room for what felt like the last time in that way. Then he stepped back, creating a space between us that felt like a fresh wound. I'll see you tomorrow, he whispered. Yes, tomorrow. I walked out with my chest aching, but somewhere inside, a tiny strength began to grow. Letting go was breaking me, but holding on would have destroyed us both. For the next week, we practiced the hardest kind of distance, emotional distance. Conversations stayed short. I kept my heart guarded. When we spoke, it was only about work. Yet every time he walked past my desk, memories washed over me so intensely I had to remind myself to breathe. And then one morning, the unexpected happened. His wife came to the office. She walked in with a calm, steady confidence, nothing dramatic, nothing loud. She spoke to the receptionist, then waited near the entrance. I felt my entire body go cold. When Daniel stepped out and saw her, he froze. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world just stopped. She moved toward him and placed a hand on his arm, not tightly, not possessively, but gently, like someone hoping her husband still belonged with her. They whispered to each other. I couldn't hear the words, but the pain on his face and the worry on hers told me enough. Then her gaze drifted across the room, briefly, and landed on me. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know anything about me. But something in her eyes said she sensed more than she could explain. My breath caught. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, not in anger or accusation, but in a quiet, woman-to-woman understanding that twisted my stomach. Daniel noticed her glance and subtly stepped between us, blocking her view. My hands trembled beneath my desk. Whatever storm was coming, I knew I wouldn't walk through it untouched.
Daniel's wife didn't stay long that morning, maybe 10 minutes at most, but her presence left an echo in the office that clung to every breath I took. I watched from behind my computer screen as she and Daniel stepped outside to talk. Through the glass wall, I could only see shapes, movements. The way her hands trembled when she spoke. The way Daniel lowered his head as though every word she said carved deeper into him. When they finally walked back inside, she looked calmer, but Daniel looked exhausted, like a man who had just walked through a storm without an umbrella. They exchanged a soft goodbye, a kiss on the cheek, and then she left. He didn't come back to his desk right away. He stood alone in the hallway for a long moment, staring at nothing. breathing slow and heavy. And I knew, without needing to hear a single word, that something in his life had shifted. He walked into his office, closed the door, and didn't come out for hours. At lunchtime, I sat in the break room alone, pushing food around my plate. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. And then, as if summoned by my thoughts, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Emma," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I looked up at him, and the moment our eyes met, I understood. He wasn't here to rekindle anything. He wasn't here to confess. He wasn't here to hold on to the pieces of what we almost had. No. He was here to let go. I nodded and followed him to a small meeting room. He closed the door behind us, but didn't sit. He stayed standing, hands in his pockets, shoulders heavy. "She asked me today," he said, his voice low. "She asked if there was someone else." My heart stopped. What did you tell her?" "I told her no," he said. "Because nothing happened. Because you and I never crossed that line." He paused, swallowing hard. But she felt something. She felt me slipping away. A tear formed in the corner of his eye, though he blinked it back before it could fall. "Emma, I can't lose my family." I nodded, though the motion hurt like a knife. "I know," he said, "and I can't keep hurting you." He whispered. That part? Those words cut deeper than anything else, because behind them was a truth I had tried so hard to ignore. This love wasn't going to bloom. It wasn't a red rose. It was a thorn. Beautiful to look at, dangerous to touch. But he was choosing the safe path, the right path. And I couldn't fault him for that. The days that followed felt like learning to breathe again with bruised ribs. Everything hurt, even the smallest things. Hearing his footsteps, his voice in a meeting, the way he avoided lingering too close. He was polite, respectful, professional. But his eyes, they still held shadows of the storm we had just survived. I spent nights trying to untangle the ache in my chest. Some evenings, I'd sit by my window apartment, wrapped in a blanket, watching the streetlights flicker like tiny spirits. I'd tell myself that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live with memories that no longer belonged to me. But then something happened. Something small but so deeply human that I knew my heart would never forget. One rainy morning, as I walked into the office soaking wet from a sudden downpour, Daniel was standing by the elevator. He glanced at me briefly, then quickly looked away, respecting the new boundaries we had built. But just as the elevator doors opened, he whispered without looking at me, "You deserve someone free." My breath hitched. "And you deserve someone who loves you without guilt," I replied, barely audible. He nodded once, stepped inside, and the doors closed between us. Weeks passed, and slowly, painfully, the intensity faded. Not the memory, not the meaning, but the rawness. Daniel began smiling again in the office, though not at me the way he used to. I began focusing on myself again, reading, walking, dreaming. Life settled into a softer rhythm, until one afternoon, everything changed again.
Daniel called me into his office. His face was pale. His hands were trembling. Something was terribly wrong. "Emma," he said, voice shaking, "I need to tell you something." I stepped closer, concern rising in my chest. "What happened?" He looked at me, eyes wet, not with longing this time, but with fear. "My wife? She collapsed this morning. My breath froze." "What? Is she?" "She's in the hospital," he said, voice cracking. "They think it might be something serious. I don't know. I don't know anything yet." He dragged a hand over his face, shaking. "I'm scared, Emma." I felt the room sway. My heart began to pound, not for him, not for me, but for a woman I had never met, yet had somehow harmed without ever touching. "Go," I said gently. "Go, be with your family." He nodded, wiping his eyes quickly. Then he whispered something I never expected to hear again. "Thank you for caring." I watched him grab his coat and rush out of the office. And as the door swung shut behind him, I knew everything was about to change. Again.
The hours after Daniel rushed out of the office felt strangely hollow. The building hummed with the usual noise, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people chatting about weekend plans. But around me, everything felt muted. My mind kept drifting to the hospital, to his wife lying in a bed somewhere, to Daniel pacing the hallway with fear, tightening his chest. I didn't know her, but I had touched her life in ways I never meant to. And now she was fighting something I couldn't see, couldn't understand, couldn't help. The thought made my hands tremble as I typed half-finished emails that barely made sense. By lunchtime, I couldn't pretend anymore. I stepped outside into the cold wind, letting the air sting my cheeks. A stormy sky hung overhead, dark gray clouds moving fast, as if carrying news the world wasn't ready for. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered into the wind, "Please let her be okay." I didn't know who I was talking to. God, fate, the universe, maybe even the guilt in my own heart. But in that moment, my wish was honest, pure, not because of what it meant for me, but because someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's anchor was fighting to breathe. And Daniel, he needed her more than he ever needed me. Hours passed. The office dimmed with the afternoon light. People left one by one until only a few of us remained. I stayed busy, pushing through the work Daniel normally handled, telling myself I was only helping the team, but really I was waiting for a message, a call, a sign. It didn't come until nearly 8 p.m., long after the sun had disappeared. My phone buzzed. Daniel. For a moment, I just stared at his name on the screen, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might echo in the empty office. I answered quietly, "Hello?" His voice was different, hoarse, tired, worn thin. "Emma," he whispered, "are you still at the office?" "Yes." He exhaled shakily. I didn't know who else to call. "What happened?" I asked, bracing myself. He hesitated, and the silence between us grew heavier until he finally spoke, They found a mass in her chest. I pressed a hand to my mouth. They're running more tests, he continued, but the doctor sounded worried. Too worried. Daniel, I'm so sorry, I whispered. He didn't answer right away. I could hear him breathing, ragged, uneven breaths of a man trying not to fall apart. She kept asking where I was. Even when she could barely talk, she kept reaching for my hand. My eyes burned. You need to be with her, I said softly. I am, he whispered. I'm right beside her. But God, Emma, I'm terrified. His voice broke then, really broke, and I felt it deep inside my chest. This wasn't the Daniel who made steady decisions or gave soft smiles. This was a man stripped down to fear and love, holding on to the woman he vowed to protect. I'm here, I said gently. I'm listening. He didn't realize how distant I had become, how distracted. She asked me if I still loved her. He paused, the silence trembling. I couldn't even speak. Not because I don't, but because I let myself get lost. My throat tightened painfully. Daniel, go home to her. Pour everything you have back into your family. Start tonight. I will, he said. I promise. Another pause. Then, Emma, thank you. For what? For reminding me who I need to be. His voice softened. And Emma, please don't carry guilt for this. It's not your fault. He inhaled deeply. I care for you, but what's happening to her, that's life. That's fate. Not you. Tears blurred my vision. I'll pray for her, I whispered. He exhaled a sound that was half broken, half relieved. That means more than you know. We said goodbye. And when the call ended, I let the tears fall freely. Not because of what I lost, but because of what he stood to lose. In the days that followed, Daniel barely came to the office. He spent most of his time at the hospital, watching over his wife, updating us through short, tired messages. The office felt colder without him, the air heavier, as if everyone sensed something fragile had been shaken loose. I filled in for him as much as I could, not out of lingering affection, but out of respect. For him, for his family, and for the vow he had made long before I ever existed in his life. When he did come in, he looked worn down, eyes tired, hair unkempt, but there was something else too, something steadier. A man choosing to fight for the life he almost let slip through his fingers. He thanked me quietly for taking over some of his workload. I nodded gently, keeping things professional, kind, but distant, respectful, safe. We had to be safe now. But one snowy morning, when he arrived earlier than usual, he asked if we could talk in his office. His face was pale. His hands trembled slightly. My heart dropped. I stepped inside, and he closed the door behind us. Emma, he said softly, I need to tell you what the doctors found. I braced myself. Her condition is serious, he whispered. They found cancer. The room spun for a moment. My hands clutched the back of a chair to keep myself steady. Oh, God. Daniel. I'm so sorry. He nodded, staring down the floor. Her treatment starts next week. Aggressive treatment. He swallowed. I'm taking a leave from work to take care of her. My breath caught. Of course. You should. He looked up at me then, eyes filled with raw, painful clarity. I want to make something clear before I go, he said quietly. Whatever happened between us, whatever almost happened, it ends here. I nodded, tears sliding silently down my face. Not out of anger, not out of regret, but because she needs me. My children need me. And honestly, I need them too. I know. I understand.
After Daniel left the office to care for his wife, the building felt different. Not silent, just strangely hollow, like a place remembering someone who once filled it with a quiet warmth. His absence settled into the corners, into the halls, into the empty chair in his office that no one dared to touch. I thought I would feel relief, or maybe clarity, but instead there was an ache, steady, dull, deep, like a bruise on a place inside me I didn't know existed. Every morning, I walked past his closed office door and felt the echo of memories I wasn't supposed to hold on to anymore. His voice in meetings, his soft laughs, the way he said my name like it always meant something gentle. But I reminded myself again and again that that chapter had closed, not in anger, not in betrayal, but in necessity. He needed to return to the promise he'd made long before I showed up in his life. And as hard as it was to accept, I knew he was doing the right thing. Still, I missed him. Not as a lover, not even as a possibility, but as someone who changed the direction of my heart. The weeks passed slowly. Winter crept into the city, covering the mornings with frost and making the evenings feel longer than usual. I found myself walking aimlessly after work, through cold streets and quiet parks, trying to untangle the thoughts that wouldn't let me rest. Life went on around me. Couples passed by holding hands. Families bundled their children in scarves and knitted hats. People laughed, argued, lived. And I learned how to fill silence with something other than longing. I started journaling again, reading again, cooking at home and letting the smell of warm bread fill my apartment. I even reached out to an old friend I'd lost touch with, meeting her for coffee and telling her small truths, never the whole one. I tried to rebuild myself, not erase my past, but grow around it. Still, sometimes at night, when the world grew too quiet, I'd feel my mind drift back to him, the way he stood in the doorway the last time we spoke, the sorrow in his eyes, the weight of goodbye trembling in his voice. And I wondered if he thought about me too, not in longing,
but in memory. In the soft, honest way two people remember something fragile they once shared. Then one afternoon in early spring, when the snow had melted but the air still carried a bite, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was Daniel. She started treatment today. Just 4 words, but they held an entire world inside them. My heart squeezed painfully. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. I didn't want to intrude. I didn't want to reopen anything we had closed. But I also didn't want to be cold when he reached out in vulnerability. So I typed slowly, "I'm praying for her. For all of you." He replied only with, "Thank you." Short, soft, respectful. And that was enough. Time stretched. Seasons began to shift. Daniel's updates came rarely, each one brief, honest, heavy with the kind of emotion he didn't have the strength to disguise. Chemo is hard on her. She's trying to stay strong. The kids are scared. I'm scared too. And then weeks later, she smiled today. Those 3 words felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I never asked for more than he offered. I never crossed lines, and he never blurred them again. We were 2 lives that had collided once deeply and dangerously, now moving on separate paths that still touched lightly at the edges, just enough to say, "I remember you. I care," but from afar. Then one evening, long after I had settled into bed, my phone buzzed again. It was Daniel. "Emma, she asked about you today." My breath caught. I stared at the screen, heart racing. Me? Why would she ask about me? My fingers shook as I typed, "Why?" He answered after a long pause. "She wanted to know the name of the woman who helped me realize I needed to come home again." I froze. My heart felt like it had been dropped into cold water. She knew. She always knew. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I had the right to say anything at all. Finally, I replied, "I hope she knows I wish her strength. Truly." This time, Daniel didn't respond right away. When his message arrived, it was longer than usual. "She does. She's forgiven me for being distant. And she forgives you too, even though she doesn't know your face. She said, whoever you are, you saved our marriage more than you hurt it." My eyes filled with tears. Forgiveness. From a woman I had never met. A woman's heart I'd bruised without ever touching. I clutched the phone to my chest and cried. Quiet, shaking sobs of guilt, relief, sorrow, and grace all tangled together. And then Daniel sent one final message. "Thank you, Emma, for letting me go." I wiped my tears and whispered into the darkness, "No, thank you for letting me learn how to love myself." From that night on, something inside me shifted. I didn't carry guilt the same way anymore. I didn't carry longing either. What remained was something quieter. Acceptance. Painful, yes, but pure. A woman can rebuild her heart, brick by brick, breath by breath, memory by memory, and by letting go of what was never hers to hold.
Spring crept into the city with shy sunlight and soft winds that carried the smell of blooming flowers.
People say spring is a season of rebirth, of letting the frozen parts of life melt and flow again. Maybe that's why, around this time, something in me finally began to open, slowly, like a bud learning how to trust the warmth again. I still thought of Daniel sometimes, but not with the sharp ache that used to twist inside my chest. Now, he lived somewhere in the quiet part of my memory, a gentle ache, not a bleeding wound, a story I once lived, not a future I waited for. Work became steady again. The office had found its rhythm, and so had I. But every now and then, when I walked past his empty office, I felt a small tug, like the echo of a song I once loved humming in the back of my mind. Not painful, just familiar. Then, one bright afternoon, while I was sorting invoices at my desk, my phone buzzed. Daniel. I inhaled sharply before opening the message. She's responding to treatment. Just that. But my eyes instantly filled with tears of relief. I typed back, "Thank God." He replied with a single heart emoji. Not romantic, not longing, but just gratitude. A human gesture from someone who mattered once, and still mattered in a different way. I didn't save the message. I didn't reread it 100 times. I simply smiled, whispered a prayer, and returned to my work with a lighter heart. Healing often looks like that. Small shifts, soft steps, quiet peace. One day, after weeks of silence, he messaged again. "She had a good day today. We took the kids for ice cream." I could almost picture it, him pushing the little girl's hair behind her ear, his son laughing, his wife smiling weakly but bravely. A family holding tight to the moments that reminded them why they kept fighting. I sent back, "I'm so glad." That was all. That was enough. He didn't write again for several days, and I didn't expect him to. I had learned to let the silence be a friend instead of an enemy. Meanwhile, I began to rediscover myself. I bought a bicycle and learned to ride on the quiet streets near my apartment. I took a pottery class and laughed when my bowls came out crooked and lopsided. I joined a book club at a local cafe, sipping warm tea while strangers became friends. Life was blooming around me again. And maybe, just maybe, inside me too. But healing isn't a straight line. It curves. It dips. It pulls you back before pushing you forward. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops and painted the sky a soft gold, I found myself standing near the park where I had once seen Daniel with his family. I hadn't planned to go there. My feet simply carried me. I walked to the same wooden bench and sat down. The wood felt familiar beneath my palms. Children played. Couples laughed. The world moved forward without hesitation. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze brush against my face. For a moment, I felt the echo of my old heartbreak, the sharp breath I took when I first saw his wedding ring, the crushing weight of watching him laugh with his children that day, the guilt that wrapped itself around me like a cold scarf. But then I felt something else, something new. Peace. Not perfect, not complete, just enough to breathe without trembling. I opened my eyes and whispered to myself, "You're growing, Emma, even through the hurt." A few weeks later, Daniel messaged again. "She asked me if she could meet you someday." My hand froze midair. Meet me? The wife? The woman whose world brushed against mine in ways neither of us planned. I didn't know what to feel. Fear? Shock? Gratitude? Guilt? I typed slowly. "If that time ever comes, I'll be there respectfully." He replied, "Not now. Maybe not soon, but someday.
She believes in forgiveness more than I ever understood. A tear slipped down my cheek, one of those rare tears that doesn't burn but softens. I wrote, "She sounds strong." He answered, "She is. Stronger than I deserve." I didn't reply to that. There was nothing I could say. Some truths don't need answers. They just need space. As the months passed, the updates became less frequent, not out of coldness, but because life was pulling him back to where he belonged. His wife's condition stabilized. Their home grew brighter. Their children laughed more. And Daniel, he seemed to become the man he was meant to be. One evening, as I stirred soup in my kitchen, another message came. "Emma, thank you for every prayer, for every kind word. My family is healing." My heart warmed softly. "I'm glad you're all finding peace," I wrote back. His final reply that night was simple. "I hope you find yours too." It lingered with me long after the phone dimmed. Months passed. The seasons turned warm. And one morning, as I sipped coffee by my window, watching sunlight spill into my apartment, I realized something profound. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I wasn't hurting over him anymore. I wasn't haunted by what if or almost. Love had changed me, yes, but it hadn't broken me. I was healing, slowly, beautifully, quietly. And one day, I would love again, freely, fully, without guilt, without shadows, because the heart, when tended gently, always finds its way back to the light.
Summer arrived soft and golden, settling warm light onto the city. The trees along my street rustled with green leaves, the sidewalk smelled faintly of fresh rain, and everything had that easy, breathing rhythm that only summer seems to carry. It was in this season, the season of warmth, the season of letting things grow, that my heart finally began to feel like it belonged in my own chest again. I didn't realize when the shift happened. Healing never announces itself with trumpets. It creeps in slowly, like sunrise slipping between curtains, touching you before you even open your eyes. One morning, as I brewed tea in my small kitchen, humming along to a song on the radio, I caught a glimpse of myself in the window. Hair loose, face calm, eyes softer than I remembered. And I thought, this woman looks whole again. Not unscarred, not untouched, but whole. Life continued quietly. The office adjusted to Daniel's long-term absence, bringing in temporary staff to fill the gaps. I found myself stepping into responsibilities I never expected, leading small meetings, organizing projects, becoming someone people relied on. Not because I wanted to prove anything, but because life nudged me forward. And one day, while drafting a report alone in the conference room, a thought came to me with such surprising clarity that I set my pen down. I am becoming someone new. Not the Emma who hid feelings until they swallowed her whole. Not the Emma who let life happen to her, but a woman who chose her path, one quiet, steady step at a time. That reality brought a small smile to my lips. Then, unexpectedly, one late July afternoon, Daniel messaged me again. "She is in remission." I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand as tears filled my eyes, tears of pure relief. I typed back, "Thank God, I'm so happy for all of you." He responded a moment later, "We have been given a second chance. I won't waste it this time." I read the words twice, then a third time. They were beautiful. They were right. And they brought me a peace I hadn't known I needed. I replied, "You're doing the right thing. hold them close. His final message that night was, "Take care of yourself, Emma. You deserve a life full of joy." I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I felt a calm, like a door quietly closing, not in sadness, but in blessing. As summer deepened, I took my evenings for long walks through the park. I passed the bench where my heart had once broken and found that I could sit there again, not as a woman drowning in longing, but as someone who survived it. Sometimes I brought a book, sometimes I brought my thoughts. Sometimes I simply watched families laugh together, their joy smoothing out the last sharp edges inside me. One warm evening, a little girl chasing a kite stumbled and fell near where I sat. I helped her up, brushing off her dress. Her mother rushed over, thanking me with a grateful smile. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked. The little girl nodded, wiping her tears. Her mother laughed. "Some things are meant to run ahead of us." After they left,
Summer arrived soft and golden, settling warm light onto the city. The trees along my street rustled with green leaves. The sidewalks smelled faintly of fresh rain, and everything had that easy, breathing rhythm that only summer seems to carry. It was in this season, the season of warmth, the season of letting things grow, that my heart finally began to feel like it belonged in my own chest again. I didn't realize when the shift happened. Healing never announces itself with trumpets. It creeps in slowly, like sunrise slipping between curtains, touching you before you even open your eyes. One morning, as I brewed tea in my small kitchen, humming along to a song on the radio, I caught a glimpse of myself in the window. Hair loose, face calm, eyes softer than I remembered. And I thought, this woman looks whole again. Not unscarred, not untouched, but whole. Life continued quietly. The office adjusted to Daniel's long-term absence, bringing in temporary staff to fill the gaps. I found myself stepping into responsibilities I never expected, leading small meetings, organizing projects, becoming someone people relied on. Not because I wanted to prove anything, but because life nudged me forward. And one day, while drafting a report alone in the conference room, a thought came to me with such surprising clarity that I set my pen down. I am becoming someone new. Not the Emma who hid feelings until they swallowed her whole, not the Emma who let life happen to her, but a woman who chose her path, one quiet, steady step at a time. That reality brought a small smile to my lips. Then, unexpectedly, one late July afternoon, Daniel messaged me again. "He is in remission." I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand as tears filled my eyes, tears of pure relief. I typed back, "Thank God. I'm so happy for all of you." He responded a moment later, "We've been given a second chance. I won't waste it this time." I read the words twice, then a third time. They were beautiful. They were right. And they brought me a peace I hadn't known I needed. I replied, "You're doing the right thing. Hold them close." His final message that night, "Take care of yourself, Emma. You deserve a life full of joy." I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I felt a calm, like a door quietly closing, not in sadness, but in blessing. As summer deepened, I took my evenings for long walks through the park. I passed the bench where my heart had once broken and found that I could sit there again, not as a woman drowning in longing, but as someone who survived it. Sometimes I brought a book, sometimes I brought my thoughts, sometimes I simply watched families laugh together, their joy smoothing out the last sharp edges inside me. One warm evening,
A little girl chasing a kite stumbled and fell near where I sat. I helped her up, brushing off her dress. Her mother rushed over, thanking me with a grateful smile. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked. The little girl nodded, wiping her tears. Her mother laughed. "Some things are meant to run ahead of us." After they left, I stared at the sky, at that pink and orange canvas stretching across the horizon, and whispered, "Yes, some things are. Some people, too. Some moments. Some almost loves that teach us more than they ever give." One Saturday morning, I sat at a little cafe working on my journal. Sunlight spilled through the window, warming the wooden table. I wrote, "I don't regret loving him. I don't regret letting him go. Both were necessary. Both made me who I am today." As I closed my notebook, a young couple walked inside, laughing, holding hands, glowing with the kind of love that was light instead of heavy. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel a sting of envy. I felt possibility, real, gentle possibility. Later that month, my friend from the book club invited me to a small gathering. I almost didn't go. I had grown used to my quiet routines. But something in me said, "Say yes." The gathering was warm, lively, filled with soft conversation and twinkling lights. It felt alive, and so did I. While browsing through the desserts table, someone cleared their throat beside me. "Hi," a warm voice said. "Do you also have no idea what half these pastries even are?" I looked up. A man, maybe mid-30s, gentle eyes, slightly awkward smile, held a tiny plate with a pastry that looked like it belonged in a museum, not on a table. I laughed. A real laugh. "No idea," I replied. "They all look too fancy to touch." His smile widened a bit more. "Maybe we can guess together." It was simple, innocent, unexpectedly sweet. We talked, light talk, the kind that feels easy, the kind that doesn't ask for anything except presence. His name was Caleb. He loved cycling. He had a quiet sense of humor, and he listened, really listened, in a way that didn't pull or pressure or confuse. When the night ended, he asked if I'd like to join their group again next time. I said yes, not because I felt sparks or butterflies, but because it felt like something good, something kind, something honest. And maybe that's where true love truly begins. That night, lying in bed with a soft breeze drifting through my window, I felt something I hadn't felt.
Life has a way of surprising you when you're not looking for it. Not with fireworks or big dramatic moments, but with small shifts, gentle turns, quiet invitations wrapped inside ordinary days. Caleb became one of those quiet shifts in my life. Not suddenly, not all at once, just softly, like a door easing open on hinges that had been stuck for years. We started to spend time together in little ways. A cup of coffee after book club, a slow walk around the lake on a breezy afternoon, a shared joke that somehow kept us laughing longer than it should have. He never pushed, never dug into things I wasn't ready to talk about, never reached for the parts of my heart that were still tender and sore from what came before. Instead, he just showed up, steady, consistent, gentle. And over time, I began to learn how to let someone be there for me without feeling terrified of what that meant. One late August evening, he asked if I wanted to go out somewhere properly. Not a date, he clarified with a grin, just real fresh air and something nicer than office ceilings. I laughed and said yes. We met at a quiet botanical garden just before sunset. Everything looked dipped in gold, soft and warm, like the day itself was exhaling. Flowers swayed lazily in the breeze like they were dancing. Butterflies floated past.
Children's laughter drifted from somewhere in the distance. I felt light, lighter than I had in years. As we walked along a stone path lined with lavender, Caleb said, "You seem happier lately." I blinked, caught off guard. "Do I?" He glanced at me, his tone gentle. "Yeah, braver too." Braver. The word wrapped itself around me like a warm shawl. "I'm trying," I admitted. "That's all any of us can really do," he said simply. We kept walking until we reached a small wooden bridge overlooking a pond. Sunlight shimmered on the water in soft ripples. I leaned against the railing and breathed in the scent of roses drifting from somewhere nearby. For a moment, the past flickered. The memory of Daniel, the pain, the fear, the longing. But this time, it didn't dig its claws into me. It moved through me gently, like a wave touching the shore and then pulling back without taking anything with it. Caleb stood beside me, hands tucked into his pockets, watching the sky slowly change colors. "Can I tell you something?" he asked quietly. I turned toward him. "Of course. You have this way about you, like someone who went through something really hard but didn't let it turn her cold." His words sank deep, brushing against the fragile places I tried to keep hidden. "I guess life teaches us," I said softly. He nodded. "It does, but not everyone pays attention. You did." Silence settled between us, but it was a calm, easy kind of quiet. No pressure, no expectations, just two people standing under a sky fading from gold to pink, letting time slow down for a while. As the air grew cooler, we found a bench by the water and sat. Fireflies appeared, tiny lights blinking in and out like little lanterns suspended in the darkening air. Out of nowhere, Caleb asked, "Are you scared of falling in love again?" My breath hitched. Not because the question shocked me, but because it was the same question I'd been asking myself for months. I watched the ripples spread across the pond before answering. "I'm scared of hurting someone," I said quietly. "And of being hurt again." He nodded slowly, thoughtful. "That's understandable. But," I added after a moment, "I'm also scared of staying closed forever." Caleb turned his head, his gaze warm and steady. "You won't. You're too open-hearted for that." I looked down, suddenly shy. "But you don't have to hurry," he said gently. "Healing isn't a competition. And love, it isn't supposed to feel like pressure. It should feel like rest." Rest. The word settled deep inside me. That's what he felt like. Not lightning, not chaos, not restless, sleepless nights full of longing. Just rest. A soft, safe place to breathe. I smiled faintly. "Thank you." "For what?" he asked. "For being patient. For being kind." He shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It's easy to be kind to someone who deserves it." My cheeks warmed, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't try to hide it. As the weeks went by, whatever we had between us deepened. Not fast, not intense, but honest. When I got sick one weekend, he asked if he could bring me homemade soup. He left little sticky notes on my desk after book club, messy doodles and simple jokes that made me grin. He remembered exactly how I took my tea without ever having to ask twice. He was the kind of man whose steadiness felt like a lighthouse. Quiet, but always there. And without realizing it, I started turning toward that light more and more. Not because he reminded me of anyone, but because he didn't. He was different, clear, whole, kind in all the ways that actually matter. And slowly, I began to forgive myself, not just for loving Danielle, but for hurting, for taking so long to heal, for simply being human. One late September night,
Caleb walked me home after a cozy dinner with the book club. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and the first hints of autumn leaves. When we reached my building, he hesitated. "Emma, can I ask you something?" I turned to face him. "Do you ever imagine a future where we try something together, something more than walks and group hangouts?" My breath caught, but not this time from fear, but from warmth, because for the first time, that kind of question didn't terrify me. It felt gentle, possible. I met his eyes, steady, hopeful, endlessly patient, and felt my heart tilt carefully toward him. "I think I do," I whispered. His smile appeared slowly, calm, and grateful instead of overly excited. "Then we'll take it slow," he said, "as slow as you need." That tenderness, that promise of patience, was the moment I realized I was ready. Not for a wild, impossible love, not for something secret or forbidden, but for a love that unfolded like the seasons, naturally, quietly, beautifully. And as he walked away that night, turning back once to lift his hand in a small wave, I felt something in me open, like a window catching its first spring breeze after a long winter. Something new had started.
The early days of autumn painted the world in warm golds and soft browns, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like my life was settling into something gentle, something steady. Caleb and I continued seeing each other, but everything happened in quiet steps, like two people walking side by side without rushing the journey. He never pushed, never asked for more than I was ready to give. And because of that, my heart, once bruised, once frightened, felt safe blooming again. One crisp Saturday morning, he invited me to a small farmer's market downtown. The air carried the scent of roasted nuts, homemade bread, and pumpkins lined along the stalls. Children laughed as they tugged their parents toward ice cream carts. Musicians strummed soft melodies beside the fountain. Life felt warm. Life felt possible. We wandered slowly, tasting jams on tiny wooden spoons and picking out apples so shiny they reflected the sky. Every now and then, Caleb brushed against my shoulder. Not purposefully, not claiming anything, just existing close to me in a way that made my chest flutter. At one stall, an old woman selling knitted scarves leaned over and whispered to me, "He looks at you like you're someone special." My cheeks warmed. "We're getting to know each other." She smiled knowingly. "Sometimes love walks quietly. You don't notice it until it's already standing beside you." I didn't answer, but her words stayed with me long after we walked away. Later, we sat on a low stone wall near the fountain, sipping hot cider from paper cups. Leaves drifted around us, landing softly on the water surface. Caleb looked out over the crowd and said, "You know, I used to think love needed sparks, fireworks, big gestures." He shrugged lightly. "But I think I was wrong." "Oh?" I asked, smiling at his thoughtful tone. "I think real love feels like this." He motioned around us, the market, the warm light, the quiet moment between two people. Steady, sure, calm. The kind that lets you breathe. My heart swelled, not with ache, but with recognition. "Yes," I whispered. "I think you're right." He glanced at me, but not with urgency.
with respect, with patience, with the kind of gentle hope that didn't ask for anything but truth. "Emma," he said softly, "I like you, more than I expected to. But we don't need to define anything tonight. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to go at your pace." I felt something warm and new unfurl in my chest. Trust. "Thank you," I said. "You don't know how much that means." He smiled, lifting his cup slightly. "To slow beginnings." I lifted mine too. Slow beginnings. Our cups touched with a soft clink, and just like that, a new chapter started. Quietly, sweetly, honestly. Weeks drifted by, each one smoothing the rough edges of my old wounds. I found myself laughing more, sleeping easier, dreaming again. Not about Daniel, not about what hurt, but about possibilities I once thought I didn't deserve. And then, one evening, as rain tapped softly against my window, an unexpected message appeared on my phone. Daniel. For a moment, my breath paused. I hadn't heard from him in months. His message read, "Emma, I wanted you to know she's recovering well. We're rebuilding as a family. I'm grateful every day." A soft warmth filled my chest. Relief, gratitude, closure. I wrote back, "I'm happy for you, truly." He responded after a moment, "And I wanted to thank you again for everything. You helped me see what mattered before I lost it. I hope you found peace." I stared at his words for a long moment, letting them settle like a final stone placed gently on an old grave. I typed, "I have. And I hope you keep finding yours." He sent a final message. "You deserve a beautiful life, Emma." No lingering, no questions, just a blessing. A goodbye done right. I didn't cry this time. I smiled, because the chapter that once broke me had finally closed, not with pain, but with grace. That weekend, Caleb invited me on a small hike just outside the city. The trail wound through tall trees with leaves turning amber and chestnut. The sound of crunching leaves beneath our boots felt like music. Halfway up, we stopped at a lookout point where the valley stretched below us in rich autumn colors. The wind brushed my hair gently across my face. Caleb reached out slowly, not to hold me, but to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull back. I leaned into the warmth of his hand. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I whispered. "Better than okay." He smiled, a soft, heartfelt smile that held no expectations, just the simple joy of sharing the moment. "Caleb," he said, voice low, "I don't want to hurt you. I want to take care of your heart." My breath caught, not from fear, but from a tenderness I hadn't felt in years. "You are," I whispered, "more than you know." A gentle pause. I held breath. And then slowly, carefully, he reached for my hand. Not to claim, not to pull, but to hold.
warm fingers intertwining with mine. Steady. Sure. For a moment, the world went quiet. The leaves rustled softly, the valley glowed under the golden sky, and my heart beat, not with panic, not with ache, but with peace. Real, honest peace. I squeezed his hand back, and in that simple, steady gesture, I knew I was finally ready for a new love. Not rushed, not forbidden, not painful, but the kind that grows naturally, the kind that doesn't fight the world to exist, the kind that stands beside you, not in front of you or behind you, a love that feels like coming home.
Autumn bowed out quietly, leaving a cool stillness in the air as winter approached. My life, once tangled in quiet longing and unspoken pain, now felt clearer than it had in years. Not perfect, not without scars, but steady, honest, whole. Caleb and I continued seeing each other with the same gentle pace we had begun. Each day, each conversation, each shared moment brought us closer in a way that felt natural, like waves meeting the shore. Soft, repetitive, certain. He never forced the future upon me. He simply walked beside me in the present, letting the future grow roots on its own. And my heart responded to that tenderness like soil warming to sunlight. One snowy morning, as I sat by my window sipping tea, Daniel's name appeared one last time on my phone. Something in me did not tense. It did not ache. It simply acknowledged a familiar presence, now distant and harmless. His message was brief. Emma, we're moving to a new city, a fresh start. I wanted to thank you for the last time. I typed, wishing you and your family a peaceful, beautiful life ahead. He replied with a final message. You helped save a part of me. Thank you. Goodbye. I placed the phone down, and this time there was no storm inside me, just calm water. I whispered into the stillness, Goodbye, Daniel. And the world quietly let that chapter fade. Winter wrapped the streets in white. Christmas lights hung from balconies. People hurried along sidewalks with scarves tucked high around their cheeks. And I felt myself stepping into this new season, not as the woman who once cried in the dark, but as someone who had walked through fire and come out warm, not burned. One evening, Caleb invited me to a small winter fair. Snowflakes drifted gently around us, settling in our hair like tiny stars. We wandered through stalls of gingerbread cookies and handmade ornaments, our breaths clouding in the cold air. As we reached a small glowing lantern tree, he stopped me with a quiet touch on my arm. Emma, he said softly, I've been wanting to tell you something. I looked up at him, heart steady, ready. He took both my hands in his, warming them between his palms. You're one of the strongest women I've ever known. Not because you never break, but because when you did, you found the courage to rebuild. Eyes filled with soft tears, not from pain, but from gratitude. And I want to be part of that rebuilding, if you'll let me. For a moment, I felt the world slow, snow falling gently, lantern light reflecting off the frozen ground, the warmth of his hands grounding me back into the present. I took a breath, full and deep. "I do want that," I whispered. "I want a future that feels like this, with you." His smile was slow, tender, filled with the kind of promise that doesn't overwhelm. He leaned forward, not too fast, not too eager, and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. A touch that felt like a blessing, a beginning, a soft declaration of something real. He whispered, "We'll walk it together, Emma, at your pace." I nodded, because for the first time in so long, I wasn't afraid of where the road was leading. Months later, as spring returned again, chirping birds, warm breezes, the world blooming around us, I found myself standing at my window, watching the sunlight move across the floor, and I realized something simple and profound. I had become a woman I was proud of. A woman who learned to let go without bitterness. A woman who learned to forgive without forgetting her worth. A woman who learned that heartbreak does not signal an ending, but a transformation. Daniel was a chapter, a lesson, a mirror. But Caleb was the beginning of something new, something steady, something kind. And as I walked out the door to meet him for an afternoon picnic, I felt the warmth of the sun on my face and whispered a quiet truth to myself. I am finally living the life I once prayed for. A life with peace, a life with hope, a life with love, not hidden or forbidden, but open and honest. The kind of love that builds, the kind that steadies, the kind that feels like home.